Thank you very much, Minister Bozinovic, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I promise to be brief, or as we say in German, schnell. But I would nevertheless like to make two remarks here. One, obviously, in reference to Croatia, another one to the way we see at NATO the Arab Spring and its implications. But let me first of all, like others before, express my sincere appreciation for having invited NATO to this important gathering. I gladly accepted to replace the Secretary General. I'm not sure whether he did the right decision to not come to this beautiful city of Dubrovnik, but I will fill him in later on once I come back. Croatia, that goes very much without saying, is a much valued NATO member, which is fully committed to the alliance's mission of collective defense, crisis management, partnership and operations. And as it was said by Senator Bigic some minutes before, Croatia has made and is making various very valuable contributions to our operations and missions. KFOR is a success story as we consider it, and Croatia has been a very steadfast contributor to it. We also highly value the significant contribution to our probably most challenging operation we are currently conducting, namely the one in Afghanistan, ISAF, as well as also the modest but valuable contribution of Croatia to OUP, our Operation Unified Protector. But let me also congratulate Croatia on taking on leadership in the Adriatic Charter initiative to train Afghan military police. I think this is a very good example on the way countries can work together to make a contribution which benefits, in fact, the entire transatlantic alliance. And last but not least, as your Minister, our chair here, let me also applaud your effort to continuing reforming Croatia's armed forces. Your very focused and continuous efforts to reform and modernize the armed forces are highly appreciated by the alliance and by the allies, as you know well, and in particular the fact that you give priority to development of expeditionary land forces, which is so critical in order to sustain our NATO military operations and missions. Let me just encourage you on that vein in order to consider also participating in some of the multinational cooperation projects that we have on the table. Smart defense, obviously, is very close and important to us, and I know that you are seriously considered to this. On the Arab Spring, let me just say a few words in terms of sharing a little bit with you how we at NATO assess and address this challenge. And as has been said before, these last few months have been indeed quite eventful. We have seen a wave of transition spreading across the Middle East and North Africa, from Tunis to Cairo to Benghazi and far beyond. And we have seen a lot of people who would like to break down the wall of fear. Some argue that the Arab Spring came very unexpected, and probably we should have known earlier and we should have known better. But at the end of the day, I think what matters is that we should welcome the Arab Spring, or what we call the Arab Spring, because it brings new momentum for sweeping changes across the countries of North Africa and the Middle East. And it has shown that the people of the Middle East and North Africa aspire for democracy, security, the rule of law, and for genuine economic and social perspectives. They choose and they chose change through peaceful demonstrations, not violent extremism. I think it's worth recalling that. And they chose the idea of freedom, not the ideological of fear. Developments in Egypt and Tunisia have also shown the immense power of social media and other modern forms of communications, of trying to bring people closer, connect with each other, and to voice their ideas, something which I in particular follow very closely at the NATO headquarters. But these phenomenal changes that we have been seeing in the Middle East and North Africa have not been ignored by the Transatlantic Alliance and its partner. In fact, they have brought new responsibilities for us. Let me just remind you that NATO forms a unique community of values and is fully committed to individual liberties, democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. I think we should consider these values to be universal principles that should apply for all people and not just for a few chosen. Freedom is not just a Western value, but it should be a universal value And it's not just a commodity for a few. It should be shared by as many as possible. Ultimately, we also think it should not be feared, but rather be considered as the best guarantee for long-lasting peace in the region. And it is in this vein and against this background that NATO fully supports the legitimate aspirations of people throughout the region. For too long, many of us have thought that we couldn't have both stability and democracy in the region. But the men and women on the Arab streets have shown that they want both. They sent their governments and also, I guess, to the rest of the world, a very, very clear message. Stability at the expense of their own aspirations for a better future is not true stability. Unfortunately, in some countries, the governments responded and still continue doing so with the use of military force to suppress the very legitimate wishes of their people for change. In Libya, the regime of Colonel Gaddafi defied its own people, attacking innocent civilians. The international community, and among NATO obviously, have reacted to that. And as you all know well, under the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1973, NATO has received a mandate to launch our Operation Unified Protector. The objective of the operation is to protect civilians in civilian populated areas under attack or facing a threat of attack. The operation was launched at the end of March, to be more precisely on the 31st of March, with the wide support of not only the allies, but also with the approval and support of many of our partner nations, including those in the neighborhood. And again, I would like to thank Croatia for its own contribution to this very important operation. Ever since then, since the end of March, we have successfully and significantly, I'd say, diminished large part of Colonel Gaddafi's military machinery, and we will continue to stay the course and fulfill the mandate until the international community decides otherwise. But we all agree that the military use of force can't be the only and the sole solution to the problem, and that's why we have already started to plan for the day post-Gaddafi, for the day thereafter. To be very crystal clear here, the NATO allies do not aspire any type of leading role here. We do not want to see ourselves in the lead, but rather we would like to see the United Nations, other important international and regional players in the lead, and in particular the Arab League, the African Union, the European Union, of course, and many others. But we have our own instruments that we can use in order to also make a contribution to a post-Gaddafi scenario in the region. And we are indeed looking forward to expanding our relations and our cooperation with the countries of the Mediterranean Dialogue and Istanbul Cooperative Initiative region. And more precisely, I'm talking here about Algeria, Egypt, Israel, Jordan, Mauritania, Morocco and Tunisia on the quote-unquote MD side, and on the Istanbul Cooperation Initiative side, Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates. With all those countries, we have in the past number of months expanded and intensified our discussion in order to seek how we can actually lift it up, how we can evaluate our dialogue and partnerships to a new level. I think that's an important thing for us to do in the weeks to come, in the months to come, but we will clearly also remain much prepared in order to continue working in the framework of the contact group, by the way, which is going to meet next week, with the African Union, with the Arab League, with all the other players in order to be able to make a contribution. Let me just basically, as a very, very quick summary, and to put this really in a nutshell, make a very short conclusion. And the conclusion, or rather the key message of NATO, is that we want the Arab Spring, or we want to see the Arab Spring blossom. We want to look at it as an opportunity, being mindful of the potential risks that come along, but we want to, first of all, look at it in a positive sense, and we want to see a region that is free, democratic, modern, and stable, because all of us, not only NATO and our partners, but also the countries in the region and the NATO allies, have only to gain from it. Thank you very much.